Hello everyone, welcome to another white hot edition of ARG Presents. I am Amigo Aaron. I'm joined this week by a man they simply referred to as Hot CoCo, the Brent. Hot CoCo, the Brent.
Hi everyone.
That's right. So, if you watched the ARG last week, and I think you did, you'll recall, we spun the wheel, we made the deal, and this week we'll be playing games selected from the vast library of our childhood computer, the Tandy Radioshack TRS-80 color computer.
Yes.
What a computer this was, Brent, to own back in the day.
Yes.
What do you remember most about owning a color computer from back in your childhood?
Hacking, air quotes, games.
Yeah, so you remember that when we did that,
Yes.
didn't you? And what would the hacking entail?
Well, for me, I certainly did not get into programming at all at this time. But I did realize how you could edit text files and stuff like that. And we would have games that we'd borrow off other people and that would have crack screens. And I very vividly remember going in there and erasing the hacker's name on our copy and putting in my bad boy was my handle at the time. And I'd be like, I hacked this game.
I was simply known as the Hammer, if you'll recall.
The Hammer.
And we would do that, and it was basically the worst kind of scummery to do that, but we were kids at the time.
Yeah.
And we had been introduced to an editor, and that's all it took.
Yep.
And the CoCo was so basic that a lot of the games would come up just in the basic DOS screen. Ignore that, folks. And it would come up, and you'd better fiddle with it.
Yeah.
And so it was an easy thing to do, an easy trick to perform. So,
and it made you, I mean, when you're 8, 10, it was like, it made you feel good. It's like, man, look what I did. Look what I made this computer display on the screen.
Yes,
so.
Absolutely. The CoCo, we actually had 2 color computers when we were kids. Let's go into a little bit of backstory on the Tandy. This is a long name, the Tandy TRS-80 Radioshack color computer 1, 2, and 3. So, the CoCo, as we'll refer to it from here on out, was actually released. The original version was released in 1980.
Yep.
It had an introductory price of $399.
Crazy cheap.
Which is about $1,200 in today's money. It ran from 80 until 91. So
wow.
A pretty good run.
Almost as long as the store itself.
It was actually manufactured by Motorola, and which is funny because I graduated onto another Motorola with the Amiga, and so did you. And it had a Motorola 6809E. And as the computer moved up in versions, it would get the ability to have more memory. The original CoCos had 4K.
Yeah.
But they were expandable. In fact, our buddy Chad was one of the early adapters. He still got his original CoCo. They were silver, the original ones.
Yep.
And he even hacked his to add a reset switch, and he put more memory in it. I believe those could get up to at least 32K. They may have been expandable to 64. Then the Color Computer 2 came out. It has 64K. And then the Color Computer 3 came with 128K, expandable to 512.
Crazy back in the day.
Yeah. Now, we never had one at 512.
No.
We did have the 128, which was sufficient. Really,
it did everything
the
you
CoCo
needed.
2 was pretty sufficient at running almost everything except for the stuff that required a CoCo 3.
Right.
So, I guess the CoCo is sort of like the CoCo 3 is sort of like the AGA chipset for the Amiga. Like you would get special, better looking stuff on that than you would get on.
Yeah.
So the TRS-80 name has been around well before the CoCo. In fact, we've mentioned it a couple times on this show. The Model 1, 2, and 3, which were the CoCo, these were machines that had the screen built into the keyboard. It was all on one big heavy unit. So that thing had those original TRS-80s had a Zilog Z80 processor.
Good old Z80.
And so that's basically where they got the name, the TRS-80. And so the funny thing about the new versions of the TRS-80 is they didn't have the thing that gave the originals the name they didn't have. So they just kept the name, but they didn't have any of the stuff that they had in the originals. So the Tandy Corporation, I didn't know this. I'll be honest, I was surprised to read this. Was out of Fort Worth, Texas.
Huh.
Yeah, and so in '77 they decided to get together and make a computer. Their goal was to have a sort of a terminal to use at farms and ranches that would hook up to a TV and let you do like bookkeeping and stuff on it. And so out of that project, which is called the Videotex Terminal Project, the CoCo was born. And they just basically the original Videotex had a modem in it. They took that out. But what they did put in was a place to put cartridges. They put joystick ports. They put a tape plug, so you could plug in an audio cassette tape, and the CoCo was born. So now the CoCo had some interesting quirks. It had, when you boot a CoCo up, it comes up to into like basically BASIC.
Yep.
And it had Microsoft BASIC on it. Which I always thought was interesting. It was a licensed version of BASIC, and it was a good version of BASIC. We programmed in it quite a bit, didn't we? And then eventually they extended it. As you got a newer CoCo, they had the extended color BASIC. The CoCo 3 included super extended color BASIC. It was super. The CoCo had 2 joystick ports. The joysticks for the CoCo, there were really 2 that you would see often. There were jet black joysticks, and then there were these sticks that were white with black, with a black middle section. The original jet black ones were just regular joysticks, but they, unlike other systems, these were analog sticks.
Yes.
They did not self-center. So basically, if you went that way and moved your hand, the joystick would just sit that way. And they were real kind of dainty. And people, and the fire button was on top of it. People hated these joysticks.
They were not good sticks.
I thought they were. You get used to them, to be honest with you, but they weren't great. Then you've got the Deluxe Joystick, which is the white with the black center. These could actually be turned into 2 different modes. You could turn a mode on where it was just like the old stick, or you could have a self-centering stick. And which we used these quite a bit. That was a pretty good stick, wasn't it?
It was a good stick. It was a good stick.
It was hefty.
Yeah. Oh yeah, it was a meaty stick.
Yeah, it was a hefty stick, but it was a good stick. The CoCo was also the first Tandy computer to have you could get a mouse for. Did you know that?
No,
we never had.
We never had a mouse.
I didn't remember this, but it's true. When we left the Tandy CoCo series and we went on to the Tandy PC line. Tandy 1000 SL, I believe was the first one we got. It had compatible joystick ports, which I totally forgot about. Yeah. So for what that's worth, but it came with joystick ports at a time where most PCs did not.
Right.
So that's kind of cool. So the first CoCo, the 4K model, which that started in 1981, it ran pretty much until about 83. Then the second one came out in 83 and ran on 86. And then lastly, the Color Computer 3 came out in 86. It ran on 91. And like I said, we had both those. Now the CoCo 3 actually had a output to a monitor. The other 2 were just your classic hook 'em in TV. Yeah, and they were pretty good. I remember ours would overheat. We used to call it the zero effect. Do you remember that?
I don't. No, I don't remember that.
And when I used to type in computer programs I'd find in Compute Magazine or there were a couple CoCo magazines. There was one called Hot CoCo, and it was not great. And there was one called Rainbow. Rainbow was great.
Yes.
I don't know if it was. It may have been from the UK. I'm not sure, but it was typical. The UK magazines crushed ours. It was very game-centric. It was thick.
Mm-hmm.
It had crap we'd never seen before because of the European model of the CoCo, which was great. And but there were 2 magazines. But between Compute, Hot CoCo, and I think Rainbow would have programs too, but I can't remember for sure. You could type in games out of the magazines, and this is something I used to do all the time, and you'd get a free game. It just took your time of typing the thing in. And when we'd leave the computer on for a while, it would overheat, I guess, and you would start seeing zeros randomly pop up around the screen. That's when you know you were screwed. And you'd better have backed this thing up to a... At the time, when I was programming games in, I don't even think we had a cassette deck.
No,
so pretty much you were pretty much boned.
Yeah.
Whenever it went south on you. Another wacky aspect to the CoCos is that we had a reset button on the back, and often games would come up in the wrong. They would have the colors reversed.
Yeah.
And so what you would have to do is hit that reset button until the colors were right. I have no idea what was going on there. Do you have any idea on that?
No, and it wasn't a reset button like you think of on a computer today. It's not like it shut the computer down and then booted back up. It just kind of blinked away, and then it would sometimes come back with the negative colors, and sometimes it'd come back with the exact same colors, and you'd have to hit it again.
Yeah. Some games had the ability to hit like enter, and it would somehow do it from software. The CoCo had a cousin or a relation in the UK, and it was the Dragon 32, the Dragon 64. And from what I found out, I was wondering about these computers, and they were basically reference designs from Motorola, and that were made over there, and they were pretty darn compatible. And the Dragon over there had better TV output. It had additional video output. It had a parallel port, which our version we had didn't have. That's kind of cool. And believe it or not, they actually licensed these in the U.S. These Dragons, but I missed them. They must not have done very well because I never ever saw one or heard one reference. Did you?
Nah. Cool name though.
Yeah, the Dragon. Yeah, it was cool. These much like this reminds me sort of like the Masters. So these things were all over the place. They had them in Mexico.
Yeah.
They had them in Brazil. They were pretty popular units, and we had a good time with ours. Some of the wacky things you could get for it. Of course, if you look right here on ours, and I'll go ahead and pull this out just to kind of show it off. Hopefully, I'll not have a disaster. Oh, well, maybe I won't pull it out. Right here, if you look, there's a cartridge slot, and that's where your cartridges go. The CoCo also had a thing that's basically like sort of like a multi-tap that would plug into the side. It was basically a box that plugged into the side that would have multiple cartridge slots in it, so you could have more than one thing hooked up. And you needed this if you were going to do certain things. For example, this cartridge slot's also where the disk drive controller would plug in. And so if you had a disk drive plugged in, you could not use a game on a cartridge unless you unplugged the disk drive, which is not a big deal. But what was a big deal is that the CoCo had a voice mod, like a sound module, which we actually had, that would hook up into that cartridge slot. So if you were going to play something off disc, and you wanted to also be able to listen to the cool upgraded sound effects, you would have to, you'd have to basically do something crazy, which what we used to do is we'd hot swap the, and what you shouldn't do, and it would screw up all the time.
Yeah, it would.
One time out of 5, it would work.
It was not a hot swappable slot.
Right.
Sometimes you could hot swap it fast enough.
Yeah, very strange. The big multi thing, we never had one. They were kind of expensive too. CoCo stuff was not cheap.
No, I mean
it was. I didn't think. I mean, of course, it was probably cheaper than most stuff. But
the initial unit was well priced.
Yeah, and at the time, since we didn't know what we were doing, everything we had was Radioshack based because we thought we had the Radioshack. We had the Radioshack's joysticks. Despite the fact you could get other ones, we had the Radioshack modem. Which talked about the modem IB, which is a 300 baud modem, which was that's where I got it all started for me on BBSs. Of course, early on we got the TRS-80 cassette, input device, so you could hook up a cassette. And then we would, much like a lot of the people over in the UK did, we used cassettes. That's how far back we went.
Yeah.
Do you remember using cassettes on that thing? I mean, that was pretty early on.
I don't remember cassettes. The first cassettes I remember using were on our neighbor's Atari.
Right. Oh, yeah, we used them on that too. But we used cassettes for years, and the good thing about cassettes is it makes it real easy. It makes it real simple to swap software. And I'm sure anyone that lives over in the UK would know. You could take your old double cassette player, the boom box, with the two cassettes, just throw one in, pop. And I had a buddy that went to martial arts with me that would just set me up. He would load me up with a ton of stuff on a cassette. Every week he'd give me a new one. So of course it was, and I didn't know what the heck was going on. I was just like, this makes games play. Sounds good.
I remember going to one of our dad's friend's house, and I was really young, so I don't remember this very well. But we walked in, and there were just piles of discs everywhere.
Yeah.
Everywhere.
Yeah, that guy, he set us up.
And then we walked out with a ton of games. It was like,
we had several caddies full of games before we had a disc drive.
Yes.
And I've told that story that was my all-time favorite Christmas gift, was getting the TRS-80 color computer disc drive with the interface cartridge, because then I can play all those games, and play them I did.
Yes.
And we had a ton of fun with this thing. We traded stuff over in the mail for years. I mean, we held on to this thing well past '83.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so it was big. We were real fond of it. So
when you moved on to the Amiga, this was still my primary computer.
It's funny because I was looking. I never knew how the line ended, and I was looking on Wiki, and there's a line on here. It says on October 26th of '90, Ed Judge of Tandy announced the CoCo 3 would be dropped from its computer line. And there was, and with no successor, they just ended the line. Surprising, there was a lot. I don't know how this works overseas, but in America, there was a huge ton of Radioshacks. They were everywhere at the time, and so a lot of people, had these things, and so it was a pretty popular unit. I could not get figures that knew how many of these were sold. And I looked everywhere to try to find them, and I couldn't find one. So I'm not sure how many of these were sold, but I would say it was quite a few.
There were certainly a lot in our small little area.
Yeah.
And that we could have been an anomaly.
Yeah. Well, our cousin had one, our aunt had one, and a lot of our friends had them.
Yeah.
There were. When you had a CoCo back today, a lot of people called these things trash 80s.
Yeah. Well,
I used to drive. I'll tell you how sensitive I was about it. Even like maybe 5 years ago, I was listening to a retro roundup, and they referred to it as trash 80, and I sent them a violent and oppressive hate mail. They actually read it on the air. I was so mad because it always used to make me mad because people would make fun of the CoCo because it wasn't the most colorful computer, but they didn't understand that like a lot of the CoCo games like crushed what they were playing. Yeah. Which gets us into what I want to talk. Another little thing I want to talk about here. In fact, I've got a specific second list of stuff here. The CoCo, because when am I going to get this chance again? So the CoCo was renowned for its clone games, right? And I mean every system's got them, right? But the CoCo had so many that it's unbelievable. And I thought I'd just go read a few of these names here and see if you could tell me what it was cloned from.
All right,
just for fun. Contras.
The Contras?
The Contras. Yeah.
What? Off of Contra?
Yeah.
Okay, sure, why not?
Let me see if I can find anything else that I find amusing. There were tons of these games. Do you remember any of your favorites?
The Contras.
The Contras, yeah.
I'm kind of surprised that's skirting it awful thin.
Here's one, Pump Man.
Dig Dug.
That's right, Dig Dug. Then we have, let's get into the Donkey Kongs. So,
oh Lord.
CoCo was renowned for its Donkey Kong clones. It had a bunch.
It had several, yeah.
It had Donkey King, it had The King, it had Donkey Monkey, it had Monkey Kong, and my personal favorite, Triple X Sex Kong.
Yes, I remember that.
So we can't go into the description of that, but it's worth looking up, if you know what I'm saying. Junior's Revenge.
I wonder what that is.
Yeah.
DK Junior.
Here's one. Return of Junior's Revenge.
Also DK Junior?
It is. That's the CoCo 3 version of that. So it had a lot of crazy ones. I mean, we could go on forever. Food War, Galagon. I mean, these are pretty... they didn't try real hard. Birds, which is a rip-off of Phoenix. Gantlet. Another personal favorite of mine. Gantlet. Russian Assault.
Oh, which, okay.
Doodlebug.
Ladybug?
Yeah. This is nothing but clones. All these pages here. We're not going to go on forever.
Front and back, ladies and gentlemen.
one of these days, we're going to look at a bunch of these clones on a special show.
We'll have a special clone edition.
Yeah, because me and Bo looked at Amigos clones. It was a lot of fun. So we should look at CoCo clones sometime. So, all that out of the way, as you can tell, we were very fond of the color computer. And before we finish up with the hardware section, we should mention that, once again, they had a sound module that hooked into this. And what it did was allow the CoCo to have a speech synthesizer. Basically, that's what it was.
Yeah.
It's very similar to what the voice would do on the Odyssey. And what we found out is in some games, you could go and see what the thing was saying in the game with a sector editor.
Yes.
Hex editor. And we could go through and change what it said. And we took great glee in doing that. Making it say stupid stuff or insult each other.
Yep.
So you might load up your favorite game and it might say like Aaron stinks or whatever. And, people like Aaron Rod.
Yeah, because it was always so slow.
You have to spell it phonetically.
Yeah.
So, but it was up. That's what that did. But I mean, believe it, at the time we were so desperate to have that added to the game that we would go ahead and try to destroy the Odyssey.
Good fun.
And the Odyssey had decent tunes. It was chippy tunes. It was sort of like
you mean the TRS-80?
What did I say?
Odyssey.
I did it again. The CoCo had this music ability. How would you? I mean, where would you put this on? It's way better than what the PC had at the time.
Well, the PC was literally just beeps and boops.
I would put it on par with it was better than the Odyssey. It was not nearly as good as, say, the Commodore. It's probably Apple.
No.
Probably the same ballpark as Apple.
Apple range, yeah.
But, I mean, you could do some pretty good tunes,
Some games took way better advantage of it than others.
Yeah. So, with all that in mind, we picked a couple games from the CoCo. I actually picked, 4 games before I settled on one because it was killing me.
You were all over the place.
Trying to pick one. And the one Brent mentioned earlier, the Sailor Man, I initially picked before I realized that I had covered Popeye on NES. I was like, well, I probably should pick something else. So I thought, well, let's go and pick one of the more popular titles. And so I went with Time Bandits. And I'll lead the charge this week. So Time Bandits was a game that was written by Bill Dunleavy and Harry Lafnier. And it was actually didn't debut on the CoCo. It actually debuted on the original TRS-80 Model 1/Model 3. So it's really old.
Wow.
And it was released by an outfit called Computer Shack. All right, now Computer Shack's an interesting outfit because basically Radioshack didn't like their name.
Right.
And so they ended up kind of leaning on them. And so finally in 1984, they changed their name to Michatron or Michatron. I don't know how you pronounce it exactly.
Wow. They should have stuck with Computer Shack.
Well, I agree. But if you ever wonder, I remember seeing both names and wondering what was going on. That's what it was. So this actually, believe it or not, this game got ported to other systems. And this surprised me when I first found out about this when we were on the Amigos. I was doing some research and I saw Time Bandits. Like, what the heck's this doing here? And sure enough, it had gotten a port. It got ported to the. Of course, it came to the CoCo in '83. There's a computer called the Sanyo MBC550. I've never heard of that computer.
Never heard of it.
It got a release there in '84. And get this, probably the flagship release for this game. The Atari ST, the 86 version, and then the Amiga got a version 88, and the PC got a version. Who'd have thunk it?
Well, the PC version is pretty different. It's pretty different.
It has a lot of differences in the ST, same thing. And I think the Amiga port was a port of the ST version, as I recall. So this game really wasn't that different. In fact, there's a screen-for-screen comparison between the Model 3 and the CoCo versus, and it with the exception of color, it's pretty much exactly the same.
Wow.
So what was Time Bandits? Well, basically, you play a character, the Time Bandit, who is going around and basically closing these time gates. Now, that's all the backstory, but what is it really? Well, really what it sort of is, in the tradition of what we were just talking about, was sort of inspired by a game that was in the arcade that you'll remember called Tutankhamun. I think you mentioned it earlier.
Yeah.
It's sort of similar, but this one has I think this is a much deeper game, and it's a much cooler storyline. So you're going through these time portals into different worlds to get treasure. All right. Of course, people aren't going to let you get their treasure. You got to fight them. So you go through 3 worlds. There's Western World, Space World, and Fantasy World. Westworld is involved in this game to a certain degree. Western World. When you go to these portals, and there's a main screen of just time portals you run to,
which isn't safe.
Yeah, it's safer, but
there's still bad guys.
Yeah, and you can pick which portal you want to go through, and then once you pick it, you go to this land, and the different lands have different theming, right, and different monsters,
enemies,
right,
different walls.
And you go there and you kill the enemies, and you in a sort of gauntlet-y, I guess is the game it's mostly compared to.
Oh, Tutankhamun is the game it's mostly
right, but I mean it's got a gauntlet feel to it to a certain degree. It's the same sort of view, and
it's like Gauntlet if you could only shoot left and right.
That's right, yeah. That's not that big a deal. You just kind of had to steer your guy in the right direction to shoot. So once you get through these worlds, you sort of go back to the portal, and then. This part I didn't know because I'd never done this. I read this and I was like, oh, I'll be darned. So you can enter each of these portals many times. That I knew. Every 4 times, though, the number of locks you have to get through to get out increases. When you go to a certain world, there are keyholes. And you have to get keys to unlock them to get other stuff. And so you have to unlock all of them to get out. So it makes it more difficult because you've got to go retrieve the key, put it in the keyhole, and get out. Anyways, this is the part I didn't understand. If you go through a portal, if you complete the portal 16 times, it closes that portal off.
Well, which I've never seen.
And it gives you a secret message.
Oh.
I don't know what the secret message is.
Oh.
I don't know. Hey, I didn't do it. It was too hard. 16 times? Are you kidding me?
Yeah, it's a lot.
That would be really tough. So each of the worlds have each of the different worlds, Fantasy World, Future World, West World, they all have different themes, in different gates that go into them are different areas. So in Space World, you've got Enterprise, Escape to Moon Base, Starship Omega, Gamma Section, Light Barriers, and the Insidious Grid. Now these sound cool.
Yeah,
they're not that different, though, are they? I mean,
you have to remember what your source material is here.
Right. Oh, and Hyperspace. Forgot that one. And in Western World, you've got New River Crossing, Dead Man's Pass, Outlaw Alley, Lost Maverick Mine, Tombstone Jail, Dodge City, and Death Valley. And in Fantasy World, you get Castle Greymore, Chaos Caverns, Black Dungeon, Forgotten Ruins, Underworld Arena, Mystic Maze, and Halls of Doom. Now, I will say this. I love stuff that has different names. You know, I love when they name rooms.
Right.
And these names are all awesome sounding. So as a young person, you're like, in your mind, you're like, oh, yeah. Enterprise, this is a tough one, but really, it's not a huge difference in the way things look. Now, in the CoCo version of this is pretty much the game. You run around, you go through these portals, you get treasure, you come back. Every time you go through the same portal, it gets harder. And I remember there's a strategy to not want to go through the same portal over and over because it would get so hard. So I would always go to another one.
Right.
And there are you heard all these names. There's tons of portals you can go through. So there's really no reason to go through one 16 times. I never would have
message.
That never would have. Oh yeah, I didn't know about it though. It never would have occurred to me. On other systems that weren't the CoCo, this game got really nutty. And the different worlds would sort of be like different games almost. Like there'd be like a Pac-Man gimmick going on, and which is. I didn't play any of the other versions, but I did see some footage of it. And I saw it referenced, and I think that's kind of cool. I mean, they did sort of separate the worlds to a certain degree and different to make them different. But I mean, I don't know what do you think about that?
Well, it's first of all, it's 2 different games to me. I mean, I know they're named the same, but they said the later game said, this time portal idea is pretty interesting. Let's go further with it, which is fine. It's a good idea to go and try new things. And like you said, there was way different Pac-Man world. You weren't shooting at all. I mean, you ran around, collected dots, and you could eat energizers and kill your enemies. That's awesome, but that isn't Time Bandit. To me, Time Bandit was all about getting the treasure. It's a high score game where you go through all these cool different worlds. You don't play different games, you go to different worlds. Mm-hmm. So to me, they're really 2 different games.
Yeah, understandable. The neat thing about this game, I did a little research on the some of the guys that made it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I found an interview talking to Harry Laffner. It's pretty interesting. The game was originally going to be called Pharaoh, and was very, very much a clone of Tutankhamun. But then they changed it a little bit to make it different. You know, another thing is he sort of mentioned that he thinks Gauntlet was sort of ripped off from them, because this thing predates Gauntlet, and he says after the game was out, some friends of his showed him Gauntlet. But he's not too mad about it. But he knows they. But a lot of people accuse them of ripping off Gauntlet when they were out before Gauntlet. So they didn't rip off Gauntlet.
I mean, fair enough. But I still don't make the Gauntlet comparison. And they 100% ripped off Tutankhamun. So
now it's not. I mean, it's not a straight port of Tutankhamun. It's got differences. He also he was asked how many copies were sold. He thinks across all the platforms they sold about, his best guess, he says, about 75,000 copies.
That's huge.
Yeah, I thought that was pretty good. He put a lot of references in the game that you don't necessarily catch, and it depends on sort of the version you're looking at. But if you look in the CoCo version, when you go to Fantasyland, there are these blue creatures with white hats and pants, called Smurfs, Killer Smurfs.
Yeah, they're certainly Smurfs.
They're Smurfs, yeah. Some of the other things, and again, this spans the entire series, but he's got, and this is, of course, also in the CoCo version, there's a smiley face that comes after you on one of the levels, and he says that's a tribute. His name's Angry Elmo, is a tribute to the Berserker arcade game. He says there's a character named Zardoz. The map mentions Zardoz, which I don't think that this was on the CoCo version. Something else, and this is definitely the CoCo version. There's some spinning blades that come after you. Mm-hmm. He says those are the glaive. So this is another episode of this show that I get to mention the glaive. This thing changed the world. Let's see if there's anything else of any consequence. Oh, they're alien creatures, and they're called Klingons, but they're actually based on creatures from the Explorers movie. If you ever saw that god-awful thing. Oh, and in the Sanyo version, we talked about that crazy one. One of the artifacts in it is a TARDIS, so that's kind of cool. Huh. And it also says when you shoot a ghost, it momentarily turns into the Ghostbusters symbol. So this man was a man of his time, that's for sure. So overall, one more thing I want to mention. This is strictly something that for our Amiga listeners. When this fellow finished up, he went over and worked on some Amiga titles, and one of the titles he worked on was one of my favorites, Major Motion, which is that Spy Hunter clone on the Amiga and the Atari ST. So he worked over there for Mitchatron or whatnot, and something else I tried to figure out was what's the scoop on this company? Because I see their name, it's Mitchatron, and of course, like I said, it started as Computer Shack, and they got pretty popular. And then, but one day, the guy that ran it, he had this gimmick where he'd go on vacation, and then you would go on vacation, and when you got back, the locks would be changed. And he did that to one of their programmers and pissed a lot of them off. He also tried to short them on their money. So finally, the fellow responsible for Time Bandits on vacation, they did the same thing to him. He's like, okay, I'm done. That was Mitchatron. And it didn't last too much after that. One more item. He had written something called the Timelords Handbook, and it was a companion manual for Time Bandit. It never got released.
Oh, that's too bad.
He still has the book, he says.
Oh, man. I wonder if we can get to talk to him at any point.
I don't know, man. It might be an interesting interview. There was also talk of a sequel for Time Bandit 2. And he says basically they had gotten into it a little bit. It was going to be called Time Bandit 2, The Rings of Fate. And it had now get this theme here. This is the backstory. It's amazing these things have such a deep backstory. The bandit, now famous for closing down the time gates, is captured and taken into a limbo dimension where he meets the great villain of Time Lord history, Wilfred Fright. Fright explains that from his vantage in limbo, he's been able to see the changes sweeping through the galaxy caused by someone's interference in the timelines. where there was once a great cooperative interstellar civilization of which the Time Lords were a part, there was now interstellar war. It's up to the Bandits to figure out what's happening and go in and fix it. So this is going to be a more, I think, a different game. That's a pretty heavy backstory. And
that's involved.
He did some graphics and drew some maps, but it was never produced.
Huh.
So that's sort of a bummeroo. This game was pretty well received. You know, it was pretty popular. I could find practically nothing on it from a review perspective.
It's tough for things back then.
But a lot of personal reviews were very fond of it, and it was quite a popular game. The book is pretty much. It's funny. The book isn't as flowery as I'd hope. Maybe he was saving that for the actual release of the manual. I couldn't find any of these for sale on eBay. So there you go.
Yeah.
So I was pretty fond of this game back then. I played it quite a bit. It was a challenging game. It was one of the faster CoCo games.
Yeah.
You know. So I really dug. What'd you think of the game?
Well, I'm a huge Tutankhamun fan, and this really takes that concept one step further, in my opinion. I love being able to go to the different worlds. Mm-hmm. I love just picking the gates, especially young, innocent Brent. You'd be like, it's like, man, it's got like hundreds of games because I can go into all these gates and do all these things.
Yeah, it's hard to explain what that is like.
Yeah.
Until you were there. I mean, I think a lot of people in the UK especially will understand it because there's a feeling where you're exploring. And
yes.
Any game that let you have the ability
Freedom.
To go wherever you want, that was special.
It was.
It also
really
you could go to
was.
multiple screens. This thing had 320 screens. That's incredible for a 32K game, you know. And so it gave you a feeling that you were really playing something epic and huge.
Yeah, it really did.
And you can see why people like say like Ultima or something, which is ridiculously huge.
Yeah.
It's like holy smokes, you know. So
I mean, as an action game, you just didn't get that kind of feeling.
Yeah.
And this was certainly an action game. Also, it was a score game. You played it to get your score up.
Yeah.
The exploring part of it was certainly there and certainly fun and entertaining. But it was all about playing for that high score.
Yeah, and it's funny. I would think certain levels, the characters, the enemies were more difficult. It's like, oh man, I don't like going to the west where they got scorpions.
Yeah.
There. But really, when I went back to play it, they were about the same. You know,
yeah.
There were certain worlds I would avoid. You know, but that's like, part of the.
And they had some things had their own concepts. Like, I think it was Space World, where it had the one-way paths.
Yeah.
Where it had like little arrows on the square, and when you go through them, you can't go back. You have to find another way around. So I avoided those type of areas. I was like, oh, I don't want to get trapped.
It was a great game. I mean, from back in the day, I really enjoyed it. I had a good time going back and playing it. I really had fun of it. So, with that out of the way, Brent, you picked a game that I sure as God made little green apples, I knew you were going to pick.
Yes.
You were no hesitation.
None.
Tell us about your game.
I picked the Dallas Quest. The Dallas Quest is based off of the 1978 television soap opera drama Primetime Dallas.
Came on. I remember distinctly. It came on it came on directly after Knight Rider would be on. I remember that it would come on at I think it was 9 or 10 o'clock. And I remember I'd watch up to the point where they showed the flyover in the opening of the Dallas Cowboy Stadium, and then I loved the music, and then I'd turn it off. Like I'm done.
And the Dallas television series is based on these wealthy Texans and their family feuding with each other and competing oil companies and sort of the drama that sort of thing can produce.
Yeah. Tell people how big that was. Do you know how big it was?
Yeah. Who Shot JR, which was one of their plot lines, was someone killed one of the main characters. Totally, 357 episodes, which for British television would be unheard of, but even for American television, is a long-running series.
Yeah.
And this is a game based on that series, which I had no idea about as a child.
No.
I had no idea, because in 78 I would have been 1. And it ran for 13 years, so I could have been old enough to sort of start to understand no idea what Dallas was, had no idea that the Dallas Quest was related to the Dallas television show at all. But it takes all the characters, it takes some of the locales, and it is directly ported into this game. In fact, some of the writers for the television show wrote the plot for the game.
You've got to be kidding.
No, direct writers from it.
Okay, wow, I would never guess that.
This game was developed and released in 1984. It got released to a few systems, including the Commodore 64, the Apple IIe, the Atari 8-bit, and of course the TRS-80.
Did you know that this had ports? I had no idea that it had been ported anywhere. I was stunned to read that.
I was pretty surprised myself, but after I started thinking about it, it makes sense.
Sure.
Yeah.
Because that's an expensive license.
Yes, yes. It was developed and produced by Datasoft, who does other games like Mr. Do, Black Magic. They did the Pole Position, Pooyan. So
yeah, they did a ton of games.
Completely different games, though.
Yeah.
Zaxxon is another one. But they also did stuff, more sort of in line with this sort of things. But they had a huge arcade presence and that sort of affair. So what is Dallas Quest? What do you do in Dallas Quest? It is a visual text adventure where you take the role of I'm not even sure you're named. I don't think you're
you
named.
are.
No.
Some guy. You're you.
And you were told to go and find this map and bring it back, and you would be handsomely rewarded. And there were two factions inside the family that were kind of feuding for the map. JR's the evil guy that will do anything he can to get this map because the map leads to incredible treasure. And then you've got sort of the other side of it where it's just get it for the whole family to kind of share the wealth sort of thing.
That was Patrick Duffy's side. I can't remember his character's name.
So it is your standard text adventure. You pick up items. You use the items to get past certain obstacles in the game. But what made Dallas Quest particularly special to me was the solutions to the puzzles were so incredibly nonsensical. So off the wall. I mean, it was the kind of thing where you're like, how did I ever find this thing out? I know as a kid, I know where I stopped playing because I couldn't get past. And I'll talk about that in a second.
I thought you ended up beating this game.
No. Never did as a kid.
I know you got to the jungle at least.
Yeah. But an idea of some of the puzzles that you have to solve in this. And puzzles in humongous air quotes.
Yeah.
Because it was trial and error. This was more Dragon's Lair than it was Police Quest. Because you had to just try things and see if it worked. You could pick up a pair of sunglasses.
Yeah, I knew you were going to say that.
When you picked up the sunglasses, you could go outside and drop them on the ground, and an owl would swoop down to pick up the sunglasses because it was out in the bright day. Well, you could get the owl at that point, and then drop the owl in a barn to kill a giant rat so you could get a shovel.
Yeah, I remember... my memory of the old days is hazy at best, and I distinctly remember that owl flying down from his perch, and he comes right down into the text.
Into the text of the game.
And he picks us, and I remember we were as stunned. I remember I was being there because Brent worked on this game.
Oh my gosh.
A lot.
Yes.
And I remember, holy smokes. There's another scene where you're in the middle of this, like a stampede or something.
Yes.
But I mean, you have to wait in this field for a thunderstorm, then you have to dig with the shovel to find this headstone.
Before that happens, you have to wait in the field for the thunderstorm, and then the thunderstorm makes all the cattle stampede. So you have to blow the bugle that you pick up at a later point, which you play a lullaby and calm the cattle.
Yeah.
And the stampede has slightly uncovered something. And you dig up the tombstone, or you dig out the tombstone. You don't actually dig up the grave. And on the tombstone is the directions to get you through the field. because otherwise you'd get lost in the field and could never get out.
It was one of those games that.
And normally I'm not a huge fan of the completely baffling, nonsensical things. But this game, for whatever reason, it was incredibly colorful. The graphics were...
Well, I wouldn't say colorful, but they were
really good
yeah,
graphics.
They were really good.
And the some of the scenes had animation, like Aaron was talking about the owl swooping down when you put the glasses on the ground.
It had music.
It had
pick up a couple times.
Yep. It would, like when you played the bugle, it played music. It had some sound effects, just really rudimentary stuff.
It had a rockin' version of the Dallas theme.
The opening theme was spectacular.
It's funny when it comes on, because I hadn't seen this forever, and it comes on, and it's like beep, 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 beep. Then the second verse, you get harmony.
Yes.
Comes in, and it sounds like, you're like, oh, here we go.
Yes.
You know, it's really good.
It's tremendous. Probably the best CoCo music I remember.
It was pretty good, yeah. And sort of like digitized graphics almost in a weird way.
It did the best with the palette it had.
Yeah.
And it had, like Aaron mentioned, with the reset switch, you had to get the red and blue right.
Yeah.
Otherwise, everyone would look freaky. And sometimes I would play the freaky version as a child. You'd be like, oh, I'm in like Bizarro World or whatever.
You were a weird kid.
So, what eventually stumped me with this game as a child? Because I've watched playthroughs of it now, even well before this episode was ever planned. When you're in the jungle, eventually you end up in a jungle, and a large anaconda comes out, and you have a monkey companion at this point that you keep bribing with tobacco to do different things. So
different area.
So I really, really thought that you had to do something with your monkey companion. I kept trying to feed the monkey to the snake.
Yeah.
I thought that's what you had to do. Past that, I kept dying. Literally years of playing Dallas as a child. Never could get past this. Do you know what the solution is now?
I don't remember.
Well, you tickle the anaconda. You have to put tickle anaconda.
That wasn't obvious to you then?
Now, and Dallas was fair-ish.
That
each screen, you could type in clue, and it would give you a clue.
You had a certain number that you could have.
Yeah. You had 9. For the anaconda, I'm almost positive the clue was like, oh, it's a big snake. I don't know what to do. It was like, that's not helpful. That's not helpful at all. That's where I got stuck as a child. Well, long story short, as you go through the game, and this is spoilers, but I guess people would know that at this point, you eventually come to an African tribe that is being manipulated by JR, the evil guy, and once you expose him, the African tribe sends you to this cave, and the cave is where the map is eventually. And JR presents you with a ultimatum. He will give you $10 million for the map right now, and that's it. You know, that'd be the end of the game, and you could just take the deal, or you could go back to Dallas and present the map to the family. Well, it was all a hocus-pocus black magic trick. Because if you take the $10 million, it was a test and you failed, and the big statue African tribe would kill you. But if you took it, you would wake up back in Dallas, sort of like a Who Shot JR type thing.
Yeah.
More of a plot element just to get you back there without you having to do anything. And you present the map to the family, and the family pays you $2 million for the map, and then they start squabbling over it, and the mom figure of the whole family gets ticked off and takes the map and throws it in a fire.
Yeah.
And that's how the game ends. It's
like that. They do give you $2 million.
Yeah, they're like, well, that mystery will never be solved, but at least you got yours.
Yeah.
And that's the game.
I watched them play this. I believe the guy finished it in under 10 minutes.
No.
It was real quick. It was under 20 for sure.
Yeah, I mean,
it was quick.
If you know exactly what to do
yeah.
in every scene. But man, this game helped me learn how to type. It helped me learn nonsensical thinking, because that was really the only way to get through most of the game.
You really employed that in your career.
But I don't know why, because of all the action games we had for the CoCo, tons of games. This game I would always go back to, and I was driven to try to get all the way through the game. And while I didn't do it as a child, I made it to about the halfway point.
Yeah.
And this was well before.
It took years.
Yeah, it was well before I'll just look up the solution online.
Yeah, there was no online for that.
And the clue system was in the game. While it was helpful for some scenes, most of them were just as nonsensical as the solution.
Yeah.
This game actually received positive reviews. A lot of people talked about how they liked the graphics were very nice.
They were.
The CoCo version, in my opinion, by far the superior version,
Really?
even over the Commodore 64.
Why is that?
The Commodore 64 had to draw every scene when you went into a room, which made it very slow. Where the CoCo didn't have to do that.
Yeah.
Also, the graphics, to be completely honest, were better for the CoCo than they were for the Commodore.
Were they more colorful in the C64?
Not really. Not really. Yeah. I mean,
the CoCo has almost a CGA level palette before you get to the CoCo 3. It's really sort of reds and blues and blacks and whites.
But they did really well with what they had.
They did. They did a really good job.
Modern reviews of this, it gets pretty panned.
Yeah.
Because of how ridiculous some of the puzzles are.
Yeah. They
are certainly nothing you could figure out. I mean, it's just try. Because it's not even like you have a list of keywords to try. You are typing everything. So...
yeah, it was a tough game.
And they did that... back in the day, I don't know what they were thinking, especially like the tickle the snake thing. I don't know how you could possibly get that. Maybe it was something I missed earlier in the game.
I doubt it.
But it was, crazy stuff. The eBay results for this, a big old nuttin'.
Really?
Couldn't find anything on it. Yeah, and the name of the game is The Dallas Quest, which because there's other games called Dallas Quest or just Dallas that come up, so you have to be a little bit careful with that. But this was even more so than some Nintendo games and Super Nintendo games, which that was huge parts of my childhood. This is a game that I always have fond memories of.
Yeah, I used to play this thing a lot.
Yes.
I didn't play it as much because I got frustrated too easy. But Brent would sit down and I'd watch him toil.
Yeah.
For a year. A good year at least. Before you toil with this thing. So.
And it was something I always went back to.
So going back to now that you've done it again,
I loved it. But
rose tinted goggles.
No.
With the glasses over the goggles.
I mean, it is sort of to an extent. It has a special place in my heart, so I'm always going to rank it a little bit higher than it deserves.
Yeah.
And really, okay, if we're going to strip all the memories away and just judge it off of its game, it's got great graphics. It's got good sound. The story is fun enough to keep you interested.
It's hard to believe that someone from the show wrote this story.
Two people worked on it.
There's a giant rat, snakes. You parachute into the jungle.
Well, to be fair, they were assistant screenwriter assistants helped on the game. But the game itself, I will have to agree with the modern critics. Some of the puzzles were too nonsensical, and the game did not give you enough direction.
I have to agree with you, but still, I can understand why you did it. It was your baby. We're gonna do the CoCo. You had to do that one.
Loved it.
All right. Well, with all that put to bed, I think it's time to hit the music.
All right.
Spin the wheel. So, Brent, tell the people what we've added to the wheel this week.
We have added the more modern, probably the most modern system we've ever had on the wheel.
Yes, I agree. Wholeheartedly.
The original Xbox.
All right. There you go.
Which, I mean, if you really think about it, nowadays, it's retro. we're getting old, folks.
Listen, we don't. The rules are crap. We do what we want. Let's just spin the wheel, make the deal, Brent. Let's see what you
All
get.
right, here we go.
Yeah, you go. Nice spin.
Felt good.
All right, let's see what we got here.
Well,
now this happened last week. What are the odds of that? The new one you put in is the one that came up.
Are you serious?
That's exactly what happened
Two
last
in a
week.
row, unbelievable.
No,
that's not true. We had it in television last week.
Okay, well, I'm saying, okay, maybe you're right. So
wow, this is a huge catalog.
So we've got the Xbox. Let me just knock over everything here. It happened eventually. So, wow, that's great. Well, there you go. So we're going to really break the rules by instantly going in from the CoCo to the Xbox.
Wow.
So,
how many years is that a jump forward? 30?
God, it's a heck of a leap. Now, I'll admit, and when we talked about this briefly when we put Xbox on the wheel, we didn't think it'd come up this quickly. But we've got Saturn on the wheel, and we talked about it, and I was like, listen, I was like, the Xbox is an old beat-down console, and the original Xbox doesn't get much love anymore. I don't know why it was so hated. Everybody likes the 360 and the Xbox One, but the original doesn't get much love. So we decided just to say, what the heck, we'll put it on there, and we have.
To be fair, I mean, the Xbox, this is really a discussion of, and this would be a lovely thing to see in the comments.
Yeah.
What is retro?
Oh, God.
And is retro a feel? Is retro a point in time? I really start to think, if you are more than 20 years old, you're retro, which Xbox is actually, it was released around 2001, so it's a little bit ahead of the retro curve.
17 years ago, retro shows were covered in Super Nintendo less than 10 years after it was released back in the day. I've been around for a long time. Because what else are you going to cover? You can only the Atari 2600 and the TI 9948 can only take you so far. So.
Well, while I don't personally consider the Xbox retro yet, I think my curve is about 20 years. I certainly think it has a place to be talked about on this show.
My curve is screw it.
There you go.
Do whatever we want. I don't think we'll do anything past the Xbox, but I'd say this is probably the cutoff date. But what the heck? I mean,
I think it'll be a fun show.
It's okay to do the Saturn, so why not do the Xbox? They had some contemporary games there, and then we'll.
Yeah, I think it'll be a fun show.
So I guess next week then we will pick two selections from the not venerable, not that ancient Xbox. A huge leap forward.
We've had so many in the Wayback Machine. It's good to actually have something a little more modern, a little more meaty.
Fair enough. So tune in next week as we delve into the library of the original Xbox.
Yes.
And we will see what we can pull out. So until next week,
cha-cha!